Hey, welcome to Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today with another awesome show for y'all today. Today, we have Scott Maderer. He is going to tell us everything about inspired life, specifically how to live it. First and foremost, I'm so excited to have him on because he has a story. It goes back to 2017 with him and his wife, Carrie, when they launched Inspired Stewardship. He's a stewardship coach. We're going to learn everything about business, focus, faith, helping Christian men and couples live out their true calling. So first and foremost, Scott, I want to say thank you for being on the show today. How you doing, man?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing fantastic.
Well, I appreciate you being on with us today. Kind of tell us a little bit about your mission, how it aligns with not just purpose and talent and treasures, but also how we spend our time. Give us a little bit of background on that, sir.
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've been a full-time coach since 2017. Before that, I was a school teacher for 16 years. And then I was in the corporate world for 11 years, ran a big team, had a big budget, flew all over the country, did all of those sorts of things. And in the process of doing all of that, my wife and I went through our own financial journey, our own difficulties. I was actually suicidal because of finances. And I began to work with my wife. We kind of turned things around and began to do things really differently. And as we did that, people noticed that we were acting different. We were working different. We were using our time different. Everything was different. And so they started saying, hey, could you help us? And so we actually started kind of helping people on the side, doing it as just sort of ministry work. And as we were doing that, we realized, hey, wait a minute, this is really more in alignment with what I want to do with my long-term calling. Teaching fed part of it, the corporate work fed part of it, but this was feeding even more of it. And so we began to study and kind of learn and develop. And over about a 6-year period, took the coaching business from part-time to full-time. And throughout that, we got out of debt ourselves. We kind of turned our financial life around. I really turned the way I handle time around, and I study a lot on how to help other people really align their life with their values, their priorities, and live them. Then, of course, last year I wrote a book on that called Inspired Living. So that came out. So pretty much all of that to say, that's been my main focus now for almost a decade or a little over a decade, is helping folks do that all over the world. I work with clients all over the world and do it from my own little home office. So it's the commute's a little better than when I was in the corporate world. That's for sure.
And like you talked about being nearly 30 years in education, you started this whole practice in 2017, serving clients. When you think about all that you are able to do now, from one-on-one coaching, dynamic speaking engagements, to interactive workshops, what's some of the things that you feel have been so impactful for your clients that you kind of keep in your back pocket, like, okay, this is working, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel?
Absolutely. So I'll share one real quick on time that is actually an easy one that everyone could literally implement right this second. You could do this before you get off this call. And it's really just changing your language a little bit. But let me back up and kind of give you the background of why you might want to do that. Nowadays, when we're walking around, especially business owners, people working in the corporate world, honestly, everyone, we use busy as a badge of honor. Someone says, how you doing today? Oh, I'm busy. That's just our knee-jerk response. And everyone just kind of looks at you and goes, oh, yeah, I get it. I'm busy too. It's almost a kind of thing of almost like that's how you're supposed to answer the question. And the truth is, all busy means is you're doing a lot of stuff. So imagine for a minute that I said, hey, I'm going to pay you $100, and all you got to do is go in my backyard. I've got a big old pile of rocks on the left-hand side of the yard, and your job is to pick up a rock, walk over to the right-hand side of the yard, put the rock down, then go back to the pile, pick up a rock, move it over. And you know what? If you manage to move all the rocks, pick them up from the right-hand side and bring them back to the left-hand side and set them down again. And I'm just going to pay you $100 a day to do that. Well, odds are good. A lot of people would look at you and go, no, I'm not going to do that at all. A few would go, well, I kind of need the money, so I'll do it. But they'd only do it so long. Even if I paid you $1,000 or $10,000 a day, at some point you would be like, okay, I've moved enough rocks. I've got my sunlight. I'm kind of buff now. I've worked out enough. I've got enough money in my pocket. I'm done. I'm tired of doing that, because there's no real meaning behind just picking up a rock and moving it from one side of the yard to the other. And yet the truth is, you'd be busy. I mean, you could honestly answer at the end of the day, man, I was busy today. I worked the whole day. I'd got a lot of stuff that I moved back and forth these rocks, but it wouldn't really have any meaning or purpose or value behind it. It wouldn't connect to who you are or give you any sense of autonomy or anything like that. And so there's only so long you would do that for money. Productive, on the other hand, is when you're actually moving rocks that matter. All of a sudden, to move those rocks, I don't know, you were unburying somebody who had fallen down and the rocks had fallen on their legs. And to move the rocks means you're rescuing this person, especially if it was somebody that you really cared about and loved. Man, you'd be moving rocks. I don't have to pay you. You're out there moving the rocks because all of a sudden it has some sort of meaning or value to you. And that's really what living out your calling is. So what's a quick trick you can do to start thinking about how are you using your time, and are you actually using it as time that's productive versus a time that's just busy? So here's the trick. You're just no longer allowed to say, I don't have time to do that. Instead of saying, I don't have time to do that, just change the sentence and say, that's not a priority for me right now. Because here's what's funny. You will actually make different choices. And the people around you will also kind of help you make different choices. Because think about it. You're working late at night. You're sitting there. It's getting after hours, but you're busy. You look over at your coworker and you go, I don't have time to make it to my daughter's soccer game. They're going to go, oh, poor you. I feel so sorry for you. You can't make it to your daughter's soccer game because you don't have time. If on the other hand, you look at your coworker and you go, it's not a priority for me to make it to my daughter's soccer game. They're going to look at you like you are a jerk. And what's more, you're going to think that about yourself. You're going to be like, really? I just said that out loud? That feels really icky. I don't want to be that kind of person. I mean, I value my daughter. My family's important to me. I even tell everyone that, right? My family's important. That's what I say. And yet I'm not living it out. So you'd start making different choices when you realize that the truth is when you say, I don't have time for that, what you're really saying is, that's not a priority for me right now. And by the way, there's other times where if you said out loud, that's not a priority for me right now, you'd be like, yeah, that isn't a priority for me right now. I need to say no to that. That's not important. This other thing is more important. And it lets you make different choices and use your time and make decisions about it in a very different way. And again, the thing I love about it is every single person can use that right this second by just taking that, I don't have time for that, out of your vocabulary.
When you think about how we get better over time as we make these crucial decisions, how we spend our time. When you work with clients, have you been able to point out, hey, what is actually soaking up your time? Is it a habit? Is it just the mundane, just kind of going through the process? What's some of the interesting things that you've been able to catch with your clients that, wow, you could probably cut that part down and have more time?
What's interesting is, as far as interesting things, usually that's the problem. They're not the interesting things. Usually they're the things that you're like, oh yeah, you're watching Netflix 16 hours a week. Maybe you don't want to watch quite so much TV. But here's the thing that's interesting about it. Usually people aren't aware of where those time sinks are. If I had asked them, and I'll tell you how you can find out in a second. But if I'd asked them ahead of time, how many hours a week do you watch Netflix? They'll be like, oh, maybe 2, maybe 3 hours. And then we actually do an exercise and it turns out to be 8, 10, 15, 16 hours. And they're like, I didn't realize I was spending so much time there. So the first step to anything is awareness, right? If you don't know what you're doing, well, you can't make any changes because you don't know what you're doing. So what do you change? So literally one of the things I've had people do is sit down, take a piece of paper and write down the time down the left-hand side in like 15-minute or 30-minute increments. So every 30 minutes, there's a new time slot or a new little box on the piece of paper. And then set the alarm on your watch or on your phone to go off silently every 15 or every 30 minutes, whichever time you picked. And during that period of time, then just jot down, what did you do during that half an hour? What did you do during that 15-minute period? This isn't about capturing every detail. This isn't, I drank 13 ounces of water and I spent this many seconds. No, it's just capturing the big picture. So, I scrolled Facebook for a few minutes. I answered a couple of emails and, I got on my client call. And then the next half hour, I finished my client call and then I did this, whatever it is. You just kind of every 30 minutes or so, every 15 minutes or so, jot down what you were doing during that time. Do that for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, a week, and then go back and look at it. And you will be shocked and amazed. I guarantee you there will be things that you will see on there and you're like, I spent that long doom scrolling Facebook or looking at kitten videos, whatever it was, right? And by the way, you could be on Facebook and it could actually be productive time because you're doing something. You're posting for your business or you're engaging with customers or something like that. But a lot of us spend time on something like Facebook. It's not really productive. It's just the reflex of, let me check and see what's on Facebook. Scroll, 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 scroll. 18 seconds go by, 20 seconds go by, 20 minutes go by. So once you kind of identify where you're spending your time, that's when I don't have to look at you and go, dude, maybe you don't want to watch as much Facebook. You're going to look at that and go, I don't want to watch as much Facebook. I'm trying to start my business and I don't have any time to do it. Well, I just found 7 hours. It's over here where I'm watching kitten videos on, TikTok. And let me just take TikTok off my phone. I just said that out loud. Maybe, just take TikTok off my phone and actually spend those 6 or 7 hours working on my business or working on my dream or, spending time with people I care about or doing something else that's important to you. And all of a sudden, those things that you didn't have time for, you'll have time for.
When you think about the cost of time, what I mean by that is whatever you're spending your time is costing you something, either good or bad. And we all fall in that. I mean, if you feel like, man, instead of working your business, you want to watch sports all the time. It's so easy to watch the highlights and then watch the announcers and the commentators. And before you know it, oh, gee, it's been 4 hours now. Kind of dive in a little bit for our audience, the cost of time, because if we don't meet the moment, while we have it, it might slip away. We won't ever get that chance to actually, spend time in the right place, especially for our business.
And economics, the phrase that they use is opportunity cost. And again, this is about money, but it's also about time because both of those things are a finite resource. Again, think about money. I don't care how much money you make, there is an end to that money. There is a point to where you've spent all of that money. I don't care how much time you think you have, there is an end to it. There is a point where you're not going to wake up one morning. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us. So when you think about it, and by the way, you don't know when that moment is. It literally could be right now, So you don't know that, and yet you'll spend time as if it's infinite, as if it's never going to run out, because there's always a tomorrow is kind of that. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of that is a good philosophy of, if you have a failure or a mistake, okay, great. You can try again tomorrow. That's true. So it's not all bad to think of it that way, but it's also not all good, because at the end of the day, what it does have a tendency to do is, like you said, we start spending that time on things that aren't really important, and we defer the things that are important. Same thing happens with money. I've seen people that will be late on their mortgage so that they can, go on vacation. Probably not the best use of your money. Probably pay your mortgage first and maybe go on a little cheaper vacation or do something else. Because at the end of the day, most of us probably would rather have a home than have a vacation. Again, maybe that's not the right decision for everybody, and I'm not trying to say that in a judgy way, but at the same time, most of us would look at that and go, probably not the best choice. So the same thing happens with our time, where we spend that time, again, like you said, watching sports or watching Netflix, and those things aren't bad. It's not watching TV is bad, working on my business is good. It's, hey, if you want to start a business, or you want to grow your business, or you want to be more successful in this way, or this is something that's important to you, or again, taking it even out of business. I want to have date night with my wife. Well, guess what? You can have date night with your wife if you make that a priority and you value that over everything else. So when it comes to time and money, it turns out that a lot of the mindset, the behaviors, the habits, the tools, the techniques are very similar, because what's happening is they're finite resources. And if you spend them like they're not finite, it always gets you in trouble. This is with money. That's what causes people to fall into great debt and have bankruptcy and all sorts of financial problems. With time, that's what causes people to never actually live their dream. Writing a book, that's something that's been on my bucket list for a long time. It's something I've always wanted to do. I knew I had a book in me. I actually have another one that I'm already working on, because it was like, I know this is something I want to do. And it's something that I put off for a long time. And then I said, you know what? I need to this is a priority for me. I need to make time for this to happen. Rearranged my schedule and created the time. I also used some tools that I had, like money and other things, to have other people help me with parts of it. So there are things you can do to leverage your time, but there's not really anything you can do to create more time. It's always finite.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio, talking to our special guest today, Scott Maderer. Go to his website, inspiredstewardship.com. I want to touch on what you talked about with managing your time, because if you are not careful, I look at it like maintenance. If you just drive the car and just pretend that it's never going to need an oil change, it's never going to need anything done, it's just magically going to be perfectly well conditioned for you to drive. That's kind of like what we're saying is counterproductive, and eventually what's going to happen is you're going to be forced to spend some time at the dealership shop, car repair shop, and get those.
Or car dealer if it's bad enough.
That too. You're going to be forced to deal with those things that should have been priorities from earlier. Mm-hmm. When you think about how you leverage time, let's go deeper into that for those who are just trying to position themselves better, healthy, be a little bit more healthy for personal self-care. How do you say, because you've been saying earlier about how you say no, but how do you start making that initial process to say no to things that you know are soaking up all the resource time that you could be delegating to actual activities that is good stewardship and good maintenance?
It's intentionality. That's really the word that I use a lot. It's about being intentional in what you do. So I'm going to give you a couple of different kind of frameworks or ways to think about it. And again, these are things people can put into practice right now. I try really hard to give you tips that you can walk away at the end of this episode and go, yep, I can start doing that. So one concept is the idea of what I call friction and smoothness. So when you think about habits, what happens is your brain gets a cue. Something says, hey, do this. And because of that cue, you then execute an action. That's the actual thing that we usually call the habit. And because you execute the action, you get some sort of reward. Okay. Your brain either gives you some chemicals, or you get, the taste of a cookie in your mouth, or whatever it is. You get some sort of reward, either intrinsic or extrinsic reward. And because of that, you repeat those habits over and over again. And the more you do them, the more entrenched they become, the harder they are to break, because all of a sudden it's like, hey, your brain's going, every time I do this, it feels good. Keep doing that. That's really what it is. It's a survival technique. And honestly, habits aren't good or bad. They just are. We all have them. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. So this gets back to intentionality. Intentionality is when you start looking at those habits and you realize, for instance, let's go back to Facebook. I don't know why I'm picking on Facebook today, but let's just go back to Facebook, or your phone interrupting you. I'm going to come on this podcast interview, and maybe I realize I have a habit of, during the podcast interviews, I have a habit of getting distracted by my phone. My phone sits over here and it vibrates, or it does something, and it drags my attention away. And instead of being focused on this podcast, I keep getting distracted by my phone over here. Well, if I realize that's that phone, by the way, that notification, that's a cue. And it's telling you, check Facebook. Those little red numbers that they put on the Facebook or on your messages or all of that to tell you you've got something unread. That's what it's for. It's a cue to trigger the habit of, I need to go check this app. I need to go see. So get rid of it. Either remove the app, or remove the phone, or remove the notification. Take your pick, right? Depends on how nuclear you want to go with it. So like, for instance, when I come on a podcast interview, my phone is in airplane mode. It's not going to send me any notifications right now. I have to take it off of airplane mode before I get some notifications. Okay. Why? because what I'm trying to do is create friction around a habitual behavior. Checking our phone tends to be a habit for most of us, around a habitual behavior, so that it's harder for me to do that. It takes me more steps to check the notifications on my phone right now. And it gives me enough time that my brain goes, dude, do you really want to do this right now? And I go, oh, no, I really don't. Okay, put the phone down. So that's the concept of friction. Smoothness, by the way, works too. If there's a habit that I want to do, I need to make it easier for me to do it. I need to create smoothness around it. So for instance, let's say you want to go for a jog in the morning. Well, lay out your clothes the night before. Put them right next to your alarm clock, and put your alarm clock on the other side of the room. Now we're tying friction and smoothness together. The friction part is to turn off the alarm, you got to get out of bed. You're making it harder to stay in bed because your alarm clock's over there. I got to go walk across the room to turn it off. And when I get over there and turn it off, what's staring me in the face? I said I was going to go for a jog this morning, and here's my workout clothes all laid out. My shoes are right there. Everything's right here. Well, you know what? I might as well go ahead and get dressed and go for a jog. And you're tying together those concepts of friction and smoothness around your habits to help you reprogram your brain to do the habit that is a good habit that you want to do, and get rid of some of the habits, or at least slow down and make harder some of the habits that you don't want to do. Now, there's about 1 million other tools that you can add around this. Believe it or not, habit change is its whole science all by itself. But there's that right at its core can get you started, where you look at those things that you're drawn to do that you decide are not the things you want to do. How can I actually break it down and start reprogramming my brain to spend more energy doing the things I want to and less energy doing the things I don't want to do?
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio, and you're watching us online. We're talking to our guest today, Scott Maderer. Go to his website, inspiredstewardship.com. We're talking about living an inspired life. I know we're wrapping up here, but when you think about this whole concept, inspired life, when I first was reading up on you, I was like, okay, this is great, because in order for your life to be inspiring, you have to be doing something that's worth watching, that someone's going to be like on the outside, wow, I wonder how they did that. I wonder what they had to go through to accomplish this and accomplish that. Putting this all full circle to really live an intentional life, a good stewardship that is worth inspiring someone. If you had a blueprint to give someone a foundation, regardless of their career path or whatever, what ingredients will you say they can start out with in building a solid foundation?
I actually use a framework in the book that is kind of has 4 parts. And this literally is the answer to what you're talking about. It's kind of one of the frameworks. There's about 3 frameworks that I kind of teach in the book. I'm a big believer in frameworks because they kind of work regardless of the details. That's the point of a framework. It should work regardless of the exact details. So here's the framework that I recommend that people kind of start with. And the first step is to invest in yourself. And the reason why is this is about that stuff you talked earlier about self-care. It's about self-maintenance. It's about being intentional in setting up your habits and your mindsets and your behaviors to give yourself that time, that money, that focus, that energy to do things. I see a lot of people skip this step, and they just go to the second step, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the problem is, if you haven't spent some time knowing yourself and figuring out what you're doing, what you're not doing, and what you want to be doing, well, then you're just kind of randomly acting. And there's no intentionality behind it. There's no direction behind it. You may hit on something that's kind of cool, but you also are going to spend a lot of time missing them because you don't have a target. And you may even hit on something that's really cool and then not even notice that you hit on it because you're just not paying attention. And I've seen this happen time after time. So the first step is that invest in yourself. That then leads us naturally to the second step, which is invest in others. The idea here is find people that are just a half a step behind where you are. You don't have to be the expert, the guru, the perfect person that stands up there and goes, I know all there is to know about this. That's not the point. The point is, even if you're just a half a step ahead of somebody, there's somebody out there that you can help. There's somebody out there that you can teach a little bit. There's somebody out there that you can go, hey, here's what I'm doing. Let's go back to that jogging. You want another thing to help you jog in the morning? Have a buddy, because then that buddy's calling you on the phone going, dude, I'm out here. Where are you? And the next day you're on the phone going, hey, dude, I'm out here. Where are you? So you're able to have that accountability and help each other. This is investing in others. It's the idea of pouring some of your knowledge, your skills, your abilities, your training into other folks. By the way, that is the definition of a business. A business is something where someone exchanges value with you in the form of money, usually, because you're giving them something of equal or greater value, which may be a service, it may be a product, it may be whatever, that solves some sort of problem or need that they have. It's all a business is. That's investing in others. That's really what that is. Could be a product, could be a service, could just be helping out your friend. Whatever it is, you start doing that. Naturally, that leads to the third thing that's going to happen. If you have invested in yourself, and if you are now investing in others, you're going to begin to develop your influence. This is when other people begin to look at you as the person that knows the answers to that question. All of a sudden, they're like, oh, you need help with that? You need to talk to this person. This person can help you with that. This person knows what they're doing over here. You want to get better at this? Oh, come talk to this person. That's influence. Influence, by the way, is not manipulation. A lot of times people confuse those. Manipulation is when I get you to do something because it's good for me. Influence is where I get you to do something because either it's good for you or it's good for both of us. It's okay if I benefit. It's not that I can't benefit, but I have to make sure you benefit at least as much as I do if it's going to be influence. And that kind of starts to happen naturally if you've invested in yourself, invested in others. That leads to the last part of the framework, which is impact the world. And the world here does not necessarily mean every person in the world. The world here just means as you develop your influence, naturally it's going to begin to have an impact. And that feeds back into giving you more influence because you actually helped someone. Now they're like, hey, this person helped me. That's impact. You've made a difference. You made a change. And inevitably that also impacts you. And now we're back all the way to the first step because you begin to grow. And that feedback loop becomes a positive feedback loop where your self-development grows, your impact on others grows, your influence grows, and your impact grows all together.
Once again, listen to our Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Scott Maderer. Go to his website, inspiredstewardship.com. Check out all the resources that he has available. We've been talking about living an inspired life. People have choices. I get passionate about that because just quick testimony, this year, 2025, has been amazing for this platform. I mean, you're talking about crazy growth. I can't be more excited, man, because I started being on YouTube video-wise in late September of 2024. I checked this morning and I see we have 6,000 subscribers on our channel. I'm like,
awesome.
Wow, this is crazy. I know we're growing in our new phase for the video, but we've been around for audio for years, since 2017. So our audio audience is much massive than our YouTube presence. But my point is everything you're saying. When you invest in yourself and you invest in others, you're creating mutual influence, and then you're creating impact. It's like I guess you can say cycle, but think of it like I've been seeing it like this is something that we have to have as a necessary recipe. It's not something that we do and then we hit the lottery ticket and the rest of our lives we just spend our time retired and just, sipping lemonade and, just having a good old time. I mean, that time will come in that season. But my point is having that kind of recipe, and that is something that drives you. It's like if you don't allow those things to drive you, then what's going to happen is what I said earlier about that metaphor with the car. Absolutely. Sooner or later, if you ain't doing your part, it is going to break down. And then you will be forced to stop everything you're doing and do the very thing that you could have been doing a long time ago. And that's having good stewardship.
Absolutely.
Before we let you go, if someone's watching and listening to us and they say, you know what, I need to connect with him and I need to find out what his services are, what's the best way that they can learn all about your resources you have available?
Absolutely. So I actually put together a page just for your listeners. So if you go over to my website that you mentioned earlier, inspiredstewardship.com, and then just /refocused, what you'll find there is there's a link where you can connect with me. There's a link with some free resources. So those exercises that I gave you earlier, you can download a copy of those for free. If I spoke too fast and went too quick and you want to read them, there's also a link to my book, my own podcast, The Inspired Stewardship Show. All of that's over there. So you can connect with me. You can get some free resources. You can buy a copy of my book and all of those things over at inspiredstewardship.com /refocused.
Last thing, not to throw a curveball, but I know you also come from a faith background as well. Sometimes I just try to keep it real. A lot of times we can overthink things. A lot of times we want to have all these different equations. And if I just do this and do this and do this and this, I'm going to have X, Y, Z. When it comes to a faith perspective, how does that also play a role with someone who is trying to make a positive impact in their community as they are developing themselves?
Yeah, I think, honestly, the framework that I talked about earlier, to me, that is a faith framework, even though I don't necessarily couch it directly in those terms, in that, what we're called to do is love God, love our neighbors, love ourselves. And all three of those things are captured in that framework. The reason that, I invest in others is because I care about other people. The reason I invest in myself is because I care about me. And the reason I do all of it is because I truly believe that doing the work that I do, doing the things that I do, not just gonna get paid for, but things I do volunteer and with my family and friends and others, is all about finding those things that God has called me to do and put me on this planet and made me good at, so that I can go out and do that and make the world a little bit better place. I call that living out the kingdom. And I think if all of us were able to do that and willing to do that and doing that, I truly believe the world would be a much better place. We'd have a much more caring place. We'd be taking care of each other. A lot of the things that we complain about and yell at and fight with each other about would go away, because at the end of the day, we'd actually be doing things out of a true care for others. And I think a lot of times right now, we really aren't doing that. We may pay lip service to it, but we don't really put it into action.
That's good stuff. So I'll leave it there. That was a great wrap up for our conversation today. Once again, go to Scott's website. It's inspiredstewardship.com. Check out all the resources. He has a podcast show. He has books. He has, I think you said earlier in the show, you have a book coming soon later.
I have a second one I'm working on. I don't have a publication date yet, but I'm working on a second book. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we might have to have you back on whenever you get that thing published. So once again, like always, Scott, for you and for our listeners, thank you for all that support the show. But to Scott, thank you for your time, man.
Thank you.